In 1961, President Kennedy called on all Americans to rise to the challenges of the day. He knew that success depended upon the unity of efforts throughout the federal government and the nation. In a memorandum he wrote, "I want coordination of government activities outside of Washington significantly strengthened across departments and agency lines." From this, federal executive boards were born. The Greater Boston Federal Executive Board, one of 28 across the country, fosters communication, coordination, and collaboration with federal, state, and local government agencies. It is our hope that through this series, folks will learn about the mission and work done by different agencies, what that means for our country, and more specifically, what that means to each of us as individuals. This is your federal government, and I am your host, Diane LeBlanc. Hello everyone. Today we are featuring the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center, which is part of the Department of Transportation's Research and Innovative Technology Administration. The Volpe Center was established in 1970 and tasked with a mission to improve the nation's transportation system by anticipating emerging transportation issues and to serve as a center of excellence for informed decision-making. Our guest today is the director of the Volpe Center, Bob Johns. Bob, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
It's good to be here.
So, the Volpe Center, part of the Department of Transportation, what is your mission and what is your relationship to your parent organization?
We've done some strategic planning in the last year and a half or so. The mission has stayed very much the same, similar to what you just said, but we tried to focus on our purpose statement and narrow it down, and we came up with a very succinct purpose of advancing transportation innovation for the public good. And that sounds fairly straightforward, but it took a lot of work to get there. So each word there was some debate about, but we advance in several ways, whether it's conducting research, whether it's through demonstrations, whether it's helping training efforts to get people knowledgeable. Transportation innovations are things that improve the system, and they can be technology innovations, they can be policies, new practices in every mode of transportation. And then for the public good is one thing we wanted to emphasize because we are a federal agency. We are part of RITA, the Research and Innovative Technology Administration, which has 4 or 5 other program offices, other associate administrators that are peers to mine that deal with coordination of research, intelligent transportation systems, the Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and a few other things.
Okay. Now, your organization is located in Cambridge.
Right.
So talk about why you're located in Cambridge, tell folks specifically where you're located, and talk a little bit about the name of your organization, Volpe, the National Transportation Systems Center.
Yeah. Well, the Volpe Center has an interesting history because the land that we're on was planned initially back in the 1960s to be a NASA campus. And those plans changed when NASA moved to Houston, Texas, and very well could have been influenced by President Johnson's administration. And there had been a couple buildings built, and John A. Volpe at the time was the Secretary of Transportation, his former governor of Massachusetts. It was his vision to let's rescue this facility, let's turn it into an innovation center, but focus on transportation. And we're right in Kendall Square, which now has become a strong worldwide innovation center. So we're very pleased where we are. We're right across the street from MIT. So it's a very much an innovation hub that we're proud to be part of.
It is the perfect location for the kind of, as you say, research and development that you all are involved in. Mm-hmm. I've had the pleasure of working with folks at the Volpe Center on a number of projects over the years that impact the federal community at large that we're all a part of. And so I am somewhat familiar with the way you operate as a fee-for-service organization. So talk a little bit about the organizational structure you have over at the Volpe Center, the number of employees you have, and what it means to be a fee-for-service organization.
Okay. Well, we are a very unique organization, and from several different perspectives. One, we deal with all the modes of transportation, whether it's surface transportation, water transportation, aviation. Two, transportation is very much a multidisciplinary field. We have all the disciplines that can deal with transportation, whether it's technology-oriented engineers or policy-oriented economists or psychologists. You name it, we have everything. There's about 570 federal employees right now. We have another 400 on-site contractors who primarily do IT work for some of our big systems. We're organized. We have 2 deputies, one for research and innovation, one for operations, which is the administrative side of the center. We take care of all of our administration, HR, IT, and facilities, and so on. But the majority of employees, over 400, work in our 8 technical centers that falls under our research and innovation deputy. And those technical centers have a total of 23 divisions that are organized by discipline of approximately 12 to 25 people in each division. And they are conducting research and development and innovation projects for our sponsors. And this is where the fee-for-service comes in, because we receive no appropriations from Congress. All of our funding comes through interagency agreements with our sponsors. So we have to, in many ways, act like a consultant, but yet we're unique in that we're a federal agency. The need, though, to serve our sponsors keeps us on edge. We have to continue our improvement in our knowledge of technology and approaches, and then we need to deliver. We need to be customer-oriented. It's been a success for 40 years.
So almost 1,000 jobs. I mean, that in itself is sort of a tremendous contribution to the local economy. And you indicate the sponsors. Are those always another federal agency? I know that many of the other transportation agencies are actually co-located with you over at the Volpe Center.
Yeah, there are several modal administrations within the U.S. Department of Transportation, whether it's highways or transit or railroads or aviation and so on. These administrations often have regional offices that are located in our facility. Some of them are, but they are also our primary customers. We receive about, it changes every year, but about $250 million worth of work from our sponsors. About 90% of that funding comes from the U.S. DOT, from these modal administrations. Our largest customer is the Federal Aviation Administration, but we do work for all of the modes within the DOT.
So again, in many respects, you operate like a private organization, again, very customer focused, a need to be on the cutting edge in order to sort of maintain yourself, but yet you are a federal agency. Are there any advantages, or what are the advantages to being a federal entity?
Well, you're absolutely right. We have to perform similar to a private consultant, as I said, because if we don't deliver, if we're not customer-oriented, or if we're not cutting edge, they'll find other services. What's unique about us is that we're federal, so we have the same goals, the same ethics, the same culture as many of our clients. And while we say, we don't compete directly with contractors or the private sector, what we do is provide that federal perspective. So our best relationships, some of the long-standing relationships that we have, are these federal partnerships. And we often use contractors to carry out our work, as I said earlier, for our sponsors. But they choose us because of that federal perspective that we bring.
So it really is a unique position that you are in. I want to talk a little bit about the Safety Council within the Department of Transportation. I know you were part of that, but in a big way, you are an executive agent of the Safety Council. So tell our viewers what the Safety Council is and what it means to be an executive agent.
Well, safety traditionally has been the highest priority in the Department of Transportation in all the modes of transportation. So it's multiple administrations have tried bringing modes together. We have these modal administrations, and like many large organizations, they can tend to be a bit silo oriented. So safety, though, crosses all of them. We have common problems. So if you think about operators of modes, whether it's a driver of a car or a truck driver or a pilot or a railroad engineer and so on, fatigue, distracted driving, all those elements can affect all of them. How can we learn from each other? So the Safety Council, sponsored by the Secretary and the Deputy Secretary, brings the modes together. There's an executive team of the modal administrators that meet quarterly, and then there's the technical team, which are peers of mine, associate administrators within the different modes that meet monthly, and we generate action teams to address things like fatigue, or cybersecurity is a recent emerging area, and those teams work together to come up with approaches that would maximize the whole department priorities on safety. Our role is to facilitate that, to provide staff support, to be a link to the top management about some of the priorities we're coming up with, and it's been very successful, very enjoyable for me.
What the simulator is about is studying human factors problems in the operation of locomotives. In particular, there's quite a lot of new technology coming on stream that will enhance safety and productivity in the railroad industry.
In the Maritime Safety and Security Informations Lab, we track ships around the world, and we do that by approaching several other countries and telling them that we want them to share their maritime information along their coastline with us. In so, they create a network where we have over 70 participating nations sharing data and maritime information across the world. We work directly with the US Navy, Mexican Navy, and various navies and governments around the world. It's a government-to-government system. We've been advancing this technology since 2005.
Each of these are sort of individual agencies, but they've got common issues, and again, they're all concerned about safety, so it makes sense and certainly seems to be in the best interest of the American people that you would operate in that way. I had the privilege of attending the 40th anniversary celebration at the Volpe Center a few years back, and it really was a testimony to the contributions that have been made to the American people, to the transportation industry. In your opinion, what are some of the most significant contributions and accomplishments of the Volpe Center over the years?
There's been several over the 40 years. I would single out a few. For the Federal Aviation Administration, our development of the Enhanced Traffic Management System, the ETMS, really was a step forward to help FAA manage flights, manage the navigations, and particularly look at weather situations of how to reroute flights. We did a lot of modeling, a lot of technology to put that in place, and it's being operated now by FAA. Another example that we actually won an award from Harvard University for a public innovation is our tracking of ships and vessels that we started working in the Panama Canal. The Navy became very interested, and we now have this cooperative agreement with 60 countries that are providing data that allows all ships to be tracked, and that's being used for a variety of services. and purposes. A third one that I'll single out is the corporate average fuel economy work that we do for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And this administration has put a high priority on that. They got through Congress rules to increase the average miles per gallon on passenger cars in the next several years. We do all of the analysis, all of the modeling, all the feasibility studies to test those different assumptions. Wow. So those are just a few. Rail grade crossings, detection of alcohol and drugs. We've done many over the years, and that's just sort of scratching the surface.
It's good stuff. Now, the infrastructure, been reported by many, transportation infrastructure to be on the decline. Mm-hmm. What's your sort of expert professional evaluation of the current state of the transportation infrastructure?
Well, it is on the decline, and you can look in all the modes of transportation. There are issues just about what we call as one of our strategic goals in the DOT of the state of good repair. And part of the problem is that, particularly in the financial economic climate that we're in right now, there is not enough funding to maintain that infrastructure. So you can tell that with potholes on highways and old subway systems like the T here in Boston. So that's a significant area of concern.
Now, does Volpe get involved in addressing those challenges, or do you just have to sort of deal with them?
No, we do. We do. On that financing issue, we actually have people in this week, experts who are looking at public-private partnerships as a mechanism. That's not going to work for all systems, but there are parts of the country that are looking at public-private partnerships to help finance highway expansion. We're also looking at the engineering work of rail cars and rail tracks and enhancing that safety, but also suggesting ways to improve the state of that infrastructure. We work a lot with the FAA on their air traffic control centers around the country, on asset management approaches to upgrade those and so on. So even though we're in sort of a financial crunch, there are always better ways to manage these
more
infrastructures.
Efficient ways,
yes.
Sure. You know, you mentioned a few of the many accomplishments of the Volpe Center. I know, because again, we're all part of the same federal community, that it was aviation technology developed at the Volpe Center that helped our nation on September 11, 2001 to respond to the terrorist attacks. Tell folks a little bit about that.
Yes, the ETMS system that I described earlier was critical in immediately being used to see what was going on in the airspace. The concern was, are there other flights up there that are a threat? And the order of the Secretary was that all flights should land. The ETMS system was able to track all those landings and gave progress reports in a real-time basis, you know, to the decision makers at the time. So we played a very critical role in helping manage that crisis.
All of the projects that you've talked about, all of the accomplishments, really get at improving transportation safety. So anything else that comes to mind?
Well, in addition to safety, we talked a little bit about the state of infrastructure. The efficiency of the transportation system is always something to look at, and we, as the economic regions have grown, there are mega regions developing around the world, and within our country, you know, how do we connect those regions that help enhance economic development? So one area is right here in New England with the Northeast Corridor, where we're looking with the Federal Railroad Administration at high-speed rail. So we have the Northeast Corridor Commission that we're working actively with to look at what would it take to enhance the train trips that you know, are taken to New York or Washington, D.C., but also looking at that impact on other modes, whether it's aviation or bus transportation, you know, to help enhance that corridor. You
know, in preparing for our conversation today, I spent some time out on the Volpe website, and it really is a magnificent website for anybody who's interested in and learning more about what's going on in the transportation arena. And I, you know, again, being associated with Volpe for a number of years, I thought I had a pretty good handle on what you do, but there were so many projects listed out there. And earlier you mentioned CyberPhysical Systems, just very, very briefly. And there's a lot out there on that. Tell folks, what is a CyberPhysical system and what is the Volpe Center doing in that regard?
Well, first, thank you for the feedback on our website. We're actually actively working right now to get it even more improved and more accessible, because we really want to get the information that we're producing, the knowledge that we're producing out to many users of that knowledge. CyberPhysical Systems, the terminology keeps changing, but transportation is a great example. There's a physical system, you know, the vehicles and the roadways, the tracks, the airports are all physical systems. More and more of their management is being done through computer systems. And so that's where the cyber-physical systems come in. A new automobile has more lines of computer code in it than an state-of-the-art airplane. So what that does is it certainly produces some benefits, new technologies, you know, that help us drive, that help the transportation system, but there also are some vulnerabilities.
Of course.
And you know, one just is, are these systems reliable? You know, what if they don't work? What if there's a bug in this that was not caught in the testing? You know, how do we ensure how does the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration, for example, ensure that new cars with new technologies are certified, you know, to be reliable? And even if they are, you know, there's still a chance of some problem. So how do these systems recover? What's the recovery process, particularly if it's a public transportation system, aviation or transit? Thinking about the recovery is very important. And then, of course, there's the new threat since 9/11 of actual terrorism or hacking that's purposely done to damage our systems. We're working with several of our modes, you know, who have these issues to think about what these technologies are and what should be done to help regulate them and monitor them.
Very, very interesting, and the kind of stuff that, you know, the average person doesn't usually think about because we don't need to. You're thinking about it for us. One of the other things I was reading more about, and I hear about it in the news every once in a while, is the autonomous car. What's going on with that? When are these going to be available to the general public? Well, are they going to be available? Is this going to happen?
There's been thinking about this for many years. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, with the start of what now is called the Intelligent Transportation Systems programs, there was work, particularly out in California at Berkeley, to look at automated vehicles and the technologies. You know, there's not only technological issues there's a lot of institutional issues. What's brought this, so that work has continued. There was a sort of a sense that this is not immediate back then. What's really elevated the interest is Google. Google now has an autonomous vehicle that they're getting a lot of publicity about. Some of our staff have ridden in it. It can drive itself using various sensing systems and navigation systems. So the technology is getting better. The institutional issues, though, are still there. So what ensures that it's safe? What happens if it breaks down or goes in the opposite lane and causes a fatality? How do we regulate that?
Who's responsible for that?
Right. The liability, the government's role. It's not unlike the kind of discussion that's going on with drones in aviation, because we certainly have seen drone technology working successfully in times of war. There's a lot of ideas about using them for peaceful purposes as well, but all of a sudden, if there's drones flying in our airspace, how does the Federal Aviation Administration regulate that, ensuring that they're not flying in the path of a commercial airline? So these are very, very big topics. The technologies are always advancing. Often the institutional issues are the primary the most difficult things that need to be addressed, and we've got people thinking about that.
Tougher nuts to crack, for
Yeah.
sure. You know, you've talked an awful lot about the mission, the purpose of the Volpe, the National Transportation Systems Center, and the things that you're doing, again, related to that purpose. But I know that the Volpe Center, that your staff, very, very involved in the community, involved in the federal community with projects that we do, fundraising that we do for charitable organizations. You're involved in your local community in reaching out to schools and trying to give back. Talk about some of those partnerships.
Yeah, we do have a very dedicated staff. So there, of course, is the Combined Federal Campaign, which in your current role, you lead, and we've had very good participation in there from our staff. But those local efforts, I was really impressed. I've been there for 3 years now almost, and we have this 20, 30-year program going with the local schools called Lunch Buddies, where we have staff who volunteer for third graders, I believe is the grade level, that they go over the noon hour once a week and read to third graders. And it's a very popular program. We get all kinds of good feedback. So that's an example. We also have some of our newer employees are working on greening efforts, working with the community in Cambridge, which is an innovative place, and how bicycle transportation, other green approaches can be implemented on their own time. So
you really do have an incredible staff over there, and you mentioned the Combined Federal Campaign, which is the program where the federal community supports local charitable organizations, and the federal community is always very generous, but really the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center is always the leader in that effort. And the Lunch Buddies program that you started over there has actually become a model for other federal agencies. So it really is important to be part of the community that you're in and to give back, and certainly the Volpe Center does that as well as any federal agency that I've been associated with. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
You've only been with us 3 years, and again, I know that you weren't in the office that long, and you engaged with the Federal Executive Board and the other federal agencies to learn about, what you could do to sort of support the broader federal community. But what brought you from Minnesota, the University of Minnesota, where you were at the Center for Transportation Studies for 20 years? What brought you to the Volpe Center?
Well, it wasn't a plan. So I got a call and was encouraged to put my name in. So I decided I would do that without any big anticipation. And several months later, I'm hired. So what continued to interest me as that process unfolded was just my long-standing work in transportation. Before the university, I was with the State Department of Transportation, Minnesota, and regional government. And back earlier than that, I was with the Santa Fe Railroad in Chicago. So I love transportation. It touches on all aspects of life. It's an important part of our society. And then what Volpe brings, like the University of Minnesota, is this innovation mission. And I've always been in those types of positions of research or innovation or improving things. And Volpe is, in terms of transportation, is the ultimate.
The leader.
So I've enjoyed every minute of it. It's a challenge. The scale is much different than being a university center director. You sort of multiply everything by 10. But we're making impacts, and I've really enjoyed getting to know the federal culture and organization, which is pretty unique. And what, even though I've been in public sector organizations like state and a public university, what's clear in federal government is this much more direct mission of working for the good of the nation. And our employees at Volpe, like yours and others, are very proud of that mission. So I've learned that, and am very pleased to be leading and excited with it.
So if somebody is interested and being part of what is so special over at the transportation, the National Transportation Systems Center, what should they do?
Well, we are always looking for people who are interested. I greeted this morning 3 student workers who are just arriving for summer work from Notre Dame University, from MIT, and from North Carolina, I think. So we have a steady stream of students coming in. We also have a steady stream of vacancies. You know, we're a little cautious right now, not knowing what the federal budget's going to be, but yet we have people retiring, we have people that we need to replace. So our website is the place to go to learn about our vacancies, learn about how to apply as a student. The federal government is just coming out with a new student and recent graduate program called Pathways. We're waiting on some guidance from Washington, but eventually that will be up on our website. And there'll be 2 or 3 opportunities for either current students or recent graduates to pursue. So I always encourage people to contact us, apply. We can also, they can call our Human Resources office if they'd like to talk to somebody live. The federal hiring process, as you know, takes a while. You have to be patient, but we're encouraging people to get their names in.
You know, and I'm glad you mentioned that, because it does take time, and there have been efforts to streamline it over the years, but it is still a very cumbersome process. But one of the great myths out there is that you need to know somebody to get a federal job, and nothing could be further from the truth.
Right.
That's not how federal jobs are given. They're not political jobs. They are career positions, and there's an application process, and you need to score high enough to be on a list in order to get your interview.
Exactly.
So we do. We want folks to join federal service, and again, be patient with the process. So,
right.
Is there anything that I haven't asked you that you think it's important for our viewers to know?
You know, I talked a little bit about the past, just talking about some of the really hot things right now, adding a few more things that I forgot earlier. The follow-up to the ETMS system in air traffic control is the next-gen system that you might read about in newspapers. We're very heavily involved in that with new communications technologies, new ways of navigating and more efficient throughput through airports and so on. That's a very big area for us. We're also heavily involved with the Federal Highway Administration on helping them implement the innovations that are coming out of their Strategic Highway Research Program, which covers numerous areas of highway research, millions of dollars invested. So they're asking us, how can we expedite and facilitate the implementation of this, which is often not as simple as just giving a state DOT, for example, a report. So those are some things. I was just out at the Federal Railroad Administration's test track last week out in Pueblo, Colorado, where we've had this long-standing relationship on looking at the structures and dynamics of cars and track systems. So learned about this innovation that we designed that helps when trains crash, the infrequent times, but when they crash, this structure that we designed that's put on the front of a rail car can spread the impact throughout the whole train and minimize fatalities and injuries to passengers. And I was able to see some real crashes on videos out there where they showed the before and after. So there's just many exciting things that we have going on. I could keep talking, but I wanted to just highlight those.
Thank you. That really is amazing, and our time has passed. It's gone by quickly.
All right.
So I want to thank Director Johns for joining us and for helping us to better understand the work of the Volpe National Transportation Systems Center and the role they play in keeping all forms of transportation safe, secure, and efficient. I thank you for watching and hope that you will continue to join us as we feature other federal agencies on your federal government.